Hi, Kate.
Hello, you okay?
I'm good, thank you, mate. How are you?
Yeah, I'm very well, thank you. It's lovely to see you.
It's lovely to see you. It's been ages.
I
You
know,
know,
hasn't it?
things good?
Yeah, good, thank you. Yeah, busy but good.
You're always busy. I'd be worried
Always.
if you told me you weren't. Yeah.
I bet you guys are as well.
You know us every now and then.
Hi,
Every now and
Tia.
then.
Lovely
Hello.
to see you.
Lovely to see you too. You okay?
Yes, I was just having a panic that Paddy thought it was 1:30. I was like, oh no, quick, text him.
I was just saying to Gemma, I don't know if the same thing's happening as what happened this morning. I was like, I bet those guys are just going to be pooped by the end of the day.
Well, we were just saying
All
we're going to have a
stuff.
wee debriefing afterwards, but I'm just blown away with people's feedback. Like Lizzie has gone down a storm. Everyone's obsessed with her naturally because she's
Yeah,
worth being
she's
obsessed with.
really good.
Yeah.
But the brilliant irony of it, she was late coming in. She was just so focused on what she was doing, practicing. She's like, I just completely lost track of time. I'm like,
Yeah.
how apt for the day that's one of the things we're going to end up discussing. And just
Yeah.
amazing,
I don't
amazing.
think you would have known that there was that delay. Like she literally was just in the zone. It was so good.
It's
I'm
I mean, I see it more and more these days, but the people like yourself, Kate, actually, that I see present and think, oh, I'm a bit jealous, actually. Really good. Anyway,
No
not to put any
pressure.
pressure on at all. Yeah, not to put any pressure on. You've got one or two people signed in here to watch,
Yeah.
just a couple. Just a couple. I saw a couple of people sign in. Hello, Ken, by the way, and a few other people. But look, I won't go through the thing of introducing you guys. You're more than capable of doing that yourself. People are sick of hearing me waffle on. So without much further ado, I'll pass over to you guys. And thank you so much for joining us. I'm really excited to hear this today. Anyway, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. Would you be able to just allow me to screen share, Paddy, and then I'll
You're going to need
put
that,
the
aren't you?
slides up. Yeah.
And the other thing, just to let everyone know, I think you've got it by now if you've attended any of the others. Please do put questions in the Q&A if you can. Would be great. I'll filter those and get them to Kate and Gemma at the end. Feel free to make comments, whoops, hollers, all that kind of stuff in the chat function. And like I said, we'll just have a little bit of a summary of all of that at the end. But I'm going to shut up.
Thank you, Paddy. Okay, let me just share the slides. Just give me a thumbs up. Can you guys see those okay? Yeah, wicked. Okay. Hi everybody, thank you for joining us. Gemma and I are, albeit nervous, also excited to be here presenting about some of our work today. So we really hope that you get a lot out of this. So yeah, we'll do some sort of brief introductions and scene set a little bit in terms of where we work. So I'm Kate. I'm a speech and language therapist and sensory integration practitioner, over the last sort of 12 to 18 months, we've been doing a lot more work in sort of the relationships and sex education field. And then my colleague Gemma is with me, so I'll let Gemma introduce herself.
Hi everybody, my name is Gemma Sharples. I'm the speech and language therapy assistant working with Kate.
An all-round megastar, like we'd be lost without her. So this is our presentation on developing the language of sex and relationships. So thinking about how we support neurodivergent people and those with learning disabilities through speech and language therapy. So we're going to talk to you about how we used a vocabulary intervention approach to delivering inclusive relationships and sex education, or what we'll probably refer to as RSE for short, throughout the presentation, to our students at our specialist college. So just so you know, I'm possibly going to be looking down because I've got my notes on my iPad below me. I wouldn't be able to get through this without them. So apologies if I'm not always looking at the camera. So to sort of do a bit of scene setting, Gemma and I work at a specialist college setting in Devon. And at our college, we have a large number of 16 to 25-year-old young adults who have education, health and care plans. And so within those EHCPs, there's a wide variety of strengths and needs. And We have a now much larger therapies team than we had previously. So at the college, we now have 3 speech and language therapists, a speech and language therapy assistant, counsellors, and also a music therapist. And then for sort of advice and consultation and guidance, we also have access to a psychologist, and we, when commissioned, have an associate occupational therapist as well. And over the last sort of 12 months or so, we've been slowly introducing PBS into our college. So we've worked very closely with PBS UK to build our strategy, and we're still working on slowly embedding principles of PBS. So that's where we work and the sort of scene that we are part of. And if any of you were on my presentation that I did last year, you'll know that a big part of our PBS strategy is embedding the PERMA model. So the PERMA model is about supporting psychological well-being and enabling our students to flourish, to achieve their best lives. So for those of you that might be new to this model, it was developed by Martin Seligman, who is a leading researcher in the field of positive psychology. I believe is often referred to as the father of positive psychology. And the PERMA model, basically, as Peterson said, describes the scientific study of what makes life most worth living. And so it's this model of happiness and flourishing. And it identifies 5 key components that you can see on the slide there. And these elements are considered essential for good psychological well-being and for helping us to flourish in our lives. And this applies to all of us here today. The third element of the PERMA model is positive relationships. And so the sort of work that we're talking about today, for us, it very much sits within that element of the PERMA model. So having positive relationships, having intimate relationships, having sex and relationships is all part of having good psychological well-being and having meaningful relationships. And we know that access to healthy and meaningful relationships is going to be a protective factor to enable somebody to flourish and to live their best life and to have psychological well-being. So we've very much been holding this in mind with a lot of the work that we've been doing. So what do we know about meaningful relationships and people with learning disabilities and neurodivergent people? Well, many people with a learning disability say that relationships are important to them, but only 3% of people with a learning disability live as a couple, compared to 70% of the general population. In a survey that Sense did in 2017, they found that over half of the disabled people that they spoke to reported feeling lonely, rising to over 3/4 for those aged 18 to 34. And obviously that was pre-pandemic, so I think it would be quite interesting to hear what those statistics might sound like now that we've gone through this COVID experience. People are not receiving adequate relationships and sex education to give them the skills and the knowledge that they need to live and have healthy and fulfilling friendships and relationships, but to also understand and explore their own sexuality, their gender, all of those really sensitive and personal aspects to our identities. And then really recently, literally published last week, the Sex Education Forum did a new survey, and they found that young people are still not receiving comprehensive and quality RSE, but they were promised this over 18 months ago when delivering RSE became a mandatory part of the curriculum in the UK. So that survey has evaluated how things have been going on since that change in the legislation, and has found that it's still not comprehensive and quality RSE. So there's still lots of gaps that we need to fill. So when we think about positive behaviour support and some of the legislation, we know that PBS is a human rights and person-centred approach reflecting each person's individuality, what makes them them, what makes them tick, what are their strengths, where do they want to develop skills in, and how can we adapt environments to enable them to flourish and to have good psychological well-being. And within some of the legislation that links with the work that we're talking about today, there's the Mental Capacity Act that most people I'm sure are familiar with. Within the Mental Capacity Act, there's section 27, which has a small number of excluded decisions where it's not possible to just bring a group of people together and hold a best interest meeting and make decisions about somebody's life. And one of those aspects is consenting to have sexual relations. So when you do mental capacity work on sex and relationships, the outcome is going to be around how you give that person more RSE, how you differentiate it, how you give them access to the information that they might be lacking, that is then underpinning their capacity to consent to have sexual relations. And then we have the Human Rights Act. So Article 8 states the right to a private life, and that includes right to relationships. So we need to think about the legislation, those acts and legislation that guides a lot of the work that we do, and what that means for a person, for their individual circumstances, particularly when we're thinking about that within this positive behaviour support framework. And so the work that we started began because I was asked to do some mental capacity assessments of a number of our students, and that was around their capacity to have sexual relations. And so the outcome of all of those mental capacity assessments was that the students needed continued education. They needed that differentiated approach to be able to help them to understand a lot of the very abstract language and concepts and ideas that underpins RSE, and therefore our capacity to have sexual relations and understand ourselves and our identities as sexual beings. So we did these mental capacity assessments. The result was people needed more education. Q trying to set up direct therapy sessions in various different contexts. So for some students that was on a one-to-one, for others it was a group setting, and then Gemma and I basically brainstorming to think of how do we go about this. Not your typical speech and language therapy work, I think, although now very much an area that we're passionate about. At the beginning, I think it's safe to say that we felt a little bit like, oh, what do we do? Where do we start? But what we did know is that language was a key part of this picture, and that we needed to think about what underpinned what we were expecting them to understand. So like if you have never had decent RSE, how can you be expected to have capacity about these really sensitive topics? So we need to teach that language, we need to differentiate activities, and we need to make it safe and fun and interesting. So to take the results of our MCA work forwards, as a speech and language therapy team, Gemma and I spoke to our colleagues. We said, like, we want to develop some informal vocabulary outcome measure that we can trial using over the next academic year, and then sort of see how effective it is. And so we came up with a vocabulary outcome measure as a team, spent lots of time talking about it, Word documents galore, trying to break down what is it we'd be saying they can or can't do at these different points, using lots of the current existing research and resources available to us from some of our SLT colleagues across the country. And for Gemma and I, when we originally thought about what are the words that we would be targeting, where are we going, particularly with one group of students who would be described as having perhaps lower support needs than some of our other students, but actually, as experiences have shown us even very recently, those support needs perhaps aren't as low as we might think, and they actually do need quite a lot more support to navigate relationships safely. And so we thought about the language, and some of the words that came up for us were consent, safe, power, and control. Consent was probably a no-brainer. Probably all of us would think about that in terms of what words do you need to understand to have safe relationships. So consent was an obvious one for us. Safe, that came up because one of our students just did not know what that word meant. And their responses, as Gemma will touch on a bit later, were those rote learnt responses of, well, what is safe? And when you dug a little bit deeper, there wasn't the understanding there to generalize that. So if you don't understand what safe means, how can you have safe, healthy, meaningful, intimate friendships, relationships? How will you have proper psychological safety and flourish within those relationships? And then we chose power and control because a big part of the law, the test under the legislation and the case law for mental capacity assessments in this area is around sort of knowing when that someone needs to be able to consent, that they can withdraw that consent. But a lot of the materials that you can use that are available from Build, for example, they talk about those power and control dynamics. So for example, if I were to give you a packet of M&Ms, would you have sex with my whoever? So those power dynamics, those control dynamics are really a key part of that assessment. So therefore thinking about, well, what does that look like for our students and what do they need to understand? And we think that speech and language therapists, assistants are skilled at differentiating materials. You know, we've a specialist set of skills for thinking about how we might step something up or step something down for the demands for a particular person, how we make something accessible to them. And so throughout the academic year, we developed our programme, our session plans, our resources around these 4 concepts of consent, safe, power and control. And we utilised a whole host of creative and accessible tools to enable our students' learning and engagement. And we, again, drew on the research that was available for how best to go about teaching vocabulary. So at the start of the academic year last year, so 2020, 2021, we supported our students to complete a range of goal setting activities to basically allow them to tell us what they wanted to learn about, what was important to them, what was not important to them, but also that allowed us to understand what they understood and to pick that apart a little bit more and to sort of start to see some of their values, what was important to them, what we were going to be able to embed and use within therapy that's motivating. And again, at that same point in the programme, we also did a number of activities in those early sessions where we were just inviting them to start to build that safe space. So Gemma did an activity with them where they were looking at the A to Z of RSE. So they could come up with whatever words they felt match the alphabet in relation to RSE. We also had some, you know, get it out of your system mind maps of what would you like to know about RSE? And then if we needed to sort of bring it back a step, we were like, what might other people want to know about RSE? Because often if we do that, they then tell us what they would like to know that they might otherwise be a bit shy to share if we were saying about, well, what would you like to know? And so that was a really good activity for them. They wanted to repeat that throughout the year, and it just allowed them to have a space to say and talk about whatever might be in their heads. And so we just had to be prepared for whatever colourful language and descriptions of things and body parts and sexual acts that might come out of their mouths. But it was part of building that safe space for them, that they were feeling heard, and that they could see that we were taking what motivated them and what they wanted to learn about, that they knew we were taking that seriously. So we wanted them to feel safe. We wanted them to know that they could ask us questions or they could use our question box, however they wanted to do it, that was okay, and that they didn't need to feel scared or shy or judged, and that they felt confident to explore their identities, their concerns, the questions that they had, whatever it might be. And one of the tools that we use to do a lot of this work in the beginning, they're called talking mats. We're huge advocates of talking mats in our team. We could probably quite easily use them every day of our working lives, or at least 2 or 3 times a week for various different reasons. So if you are interested, I wrote a 2-part blog for talking mats on how we use these tools within the RSE sessions to baseline, gather that sort of initial information, motivations for our students, and also how we've used them throughout that capacity assessment as well. So they're a really, really good tool to use. And then we moved on to doing some activities which enabled us to gather baseline data, some more data in terms of what they understood of those key words that we'd highlighted, and those concepts that underpin capacity. And again, we did this using what we know about the research. So you have to explore the semantic and the phonological information related to those words. You need to revisit words several times. You need to give them different ways of exploring those words. And so we did that by having true or false activities, word searches for students who were able to, because they had the literacy skills. We did some more sort of more demanding tasks where we gave them open questions about defining what certain words were and could they put them into a sentence for us. Whereas for some of our students, we had to step that demand right down, and we would offer them visual forced alternatives. So where one of the options is correct, see if they could place it in the right places, trying to understand what they understand. And so we did all of this so we could plot on the vocabulary outcome measure where we thought they were at that point before we got into the real thick of the therapy and the learning. And we're in a really fortunate position as a team, I think, that we get to deliver direct speech and language therapy to a lot of our students, many of which have never had it up until the point that they come to our college. And so from the beginning, we used student-led activities. We wanted to really foster that safe and comfortable environment for everybody, including ourselves. And we wanted to co-produce this work with the students and to focus on topics that were important to them and things that were meaningful to them and their lives at that time, whilst also knowing that our agenda was to target certain words. So how could we weave that into the topics they were telling us they wanted to learn about so it was meaningful? And, you know, we're dealing with really sensitive issues and topics with young adults who are not only neurodivergent, but might also have trauma. And that trauma can at times lead to them experiencing quite strong shame responses. And so being attachment trauma informed, understanding trauma within neurodiversity context was really important for us so that we could foster that safe environment. And also as a team, we're trying really hard to reconcile some of the differences that we read about and we hear about in those schools of thought between the sort of neurodiversity affirming approaches and the PBS and various other approaches. And we are neurodiversity affirming therapists. Many of us in the team are neurodivergent ourselves, including myself. So it's really important to us that our student goals are co-produced, that we are not doing to them, that we are not trying to change who they are, that it's about how they want to change and what they need to learn to have better, more meaningful relationships in terms of that PERMA model piece. And so it was really important to us to embed a lot of that good autism practice within our RSE work. So thinking about the double empathy problem, understanding that when a neurodivergent person communicates with a non-neurodivergent person, there might be some communication breakdowns because the way those people interact can be different. Whereas when two neurodivergent people interact with one another, they might not have as many breakdowns or the same breakdowns because there's more of a commonality in that communication. And so it's not about the neurodivergent person having to change to meet the neurotypical person. Actually, maybe this person needs to do some of the work. So thinking about how that looks, how we communicate with other people within relationships, how we get it wrong sometimes, and that's okay. And then how that links very much with perspective taking, that sort of growth mindset that Lizzie spoke about earlier, for those of you that were in her talk, you know, that we think about different people's perspectives. Really important for healthy relationships, isn't it? And to navigate intimate sort of relationships. We also wanted to really work on self-advocacy. so thinking about consent, power, control, how you keep yourself safe, involves so much self-advocacy to be able to say what you do or do not want in any given relationship related sort of context. And then also we think a lot in our work, in everything that we do, about interoceptive awareness. So if you don't understand what safe might feel like in your body, how are you going to potentially relate to somebody else and what it might feel like for them? How are you going to know what it might look like, or how you make that feeling happen? so complex. So we're really trying to build in a lot of that good autism practice into our work within that PBS context. So I guess, how do we build that safe space? I think for us it's about how we show up. What are we in control of that helps us to build that safe space? And I think that there are several strategies that worked well for us, and I've just sort of documented 4 of them on this slide. So the first one is about attuning and validating. So listening to the person's perspective and giving them time to explore this before thinking about offering other perspectives or politely challenging them. Because we have to remember that particularly for a lot of neurodivergent people, that they may be holding a lot of relational trauma from their previous experiences of interactions with others. And so if we invalidate their experiences, we're only compounding that, we're only adding to it. So it was really important that we attuned and validated to those different experiences that they were having. We also wanted to protect the space. So as invariably happens, there's knocks at the door, people coming in to look around or whatever, but we tried really hard to limit distractions and protect that space, to uphold what we had all agreed as a group, and to give them the space that they need. We also protected the space by allowing, for example, one particular student who part of the way that they build a connection or maintain their connection with us as their therapists is to have some time where they can info dump about what they want to info dump about. And so at the minute, that's might be certain films that are out, but having that space at the start before the other students arrived or at the end, just to have that rapport and connection with us was really, really important, because then we could work on the other stuff, which was also being co-led by them anyway, but they also had this protected time just to chat about non-RSE related things. So that was really important. Offering reassurance. I mean, basically, we were all young people once upon a time. So didn't we all want to know about sex and relationships and learn about these weird and wonderful things related to sex and relationships? But the difference being for a lot of our students compared to perhaps some other neurotypical people's experiences, the very nature of being in special educational needs and having peers who have similar difficulties in their understanding or their lived experiences is that they can't learn from one another as easily, because there's question marks over people's understanding of what they are sharing with one another. And for a lot of our students, they don't necessarily have a lot of those conversations at home either. So where are they learning this information from? So for some, it's porn. There's lots of research now about porn and the impact that has on development, on adolescence. They're potentially learning it from different series on Netflix or Apple TV or whatever. So navigating what they see, how they interpret that, what that means for real life, can be really tricky, which is why it was really important to have a safe space. And believe me, if we could share some of the examples of questions we've been asked, you do need to be prepared to be not quite sure what to say. And that's okay, because it's actually a real privilege that someone feels that they can ask you those questions. And then differentiating the materials is the last one there. So I think for all of our work, regardless of the topic, a reoccurring theme for us with students is that they come to us, they seek that connection a lot of the time because they know that we get them. They know that we will differentiate what we say and do to make that moment easier for them to access. So we'll get a whiteboard out, we'll do a comic strip conversation, we'll give them some forced alternatives, we'll lower the demand for their cognitive and language centers in the brains, because when they're distressed, a verbal conversation is not going to help. So having that differentiated material, allowing for them to be able to access that learning without as many language demands. You know, RSE concepts are hard, they're abstract, they are hard to visualize sometimes, like what is safe, for example. And they're not necessarily part of their lived experiences yet. And we know that for a lot of our students, it is their lived experiences that helps them. That it's my lived experiences as a neurodivergent person that helps me a lot of the time. And if I haven't lived it, I find it really hard to make predictions, to be able to safeguard myself against certain things happening. So if you haven't lived it, how are you going to be able to attribute meaning to different things? So differentiating and checking in on ourselves and what we're doing and what we're demanding of people, I think was really important for building that safe space as well. All right, I'm going to hand over to Gemma now so you can have a break from my voice.
Thank you. Yeah, so just sort of talk you through some of the activities we did. So we covered a lot of topics in our RSE sessions. Some of them were, like Kate said, what they said they wanted to learn about. Some of the things were things that we as a team felt were really important to talk about. And within all these topics that we covered, we were constantly weaving in those 4 core words that we did for our vocabulary intervention. So these pictures here that you can see was some work exploring the subject of sexting, which, as you know, for young people today is quite a prevalent thing, I think. So we kind of thought about the risks involved in sexting, why people might do it, you know, how to text people respectfully and how to keep safe, both like yourself and keeping the other person safe. So in the photo on the far right with the 3 columns, we kind of thought about the risks involved with sending, receiving and asking for these texts as a way of building their perspective taking skills and helping them to see how this particular type of interaction can affect the people involved from both sides. We've used mind maps as a way of exploring how to keep safe when texting and kind of thinking about why people want to sext. We've also done quite a few activities where I've drawn a massive mobile phone on the board and we've written out a bunch of text messages as a group to kind of explore how different requests and responses might make people feel and what might happen after. So we've kind of thought about, well, if you received this text, how would you feel? What could you do about this text? Or if you sent this kind of text, how would the other person feel? So really kind of breaking it down for them. And yeah, we are really always bringing it back to how these interactions make people feel. Does it give people uncomfortable or comfortable feelings? And to help build their own interoceptive awareness and to build their perspective taking skills for the other person involved in this type of interaction. This one is so one of our groups decided that they would like to kind of explore the timeline of a relationship through comic strip conversations. So we use comic strip conversations a lot at the college. So yeah, we use them for all different things. And we had these characters for weeks with our sessions, so we called Bob and Karen. And we kind of took it from their first meeting at college. So what might Bob and Karen want to say to each other? What would make you feel uncomfortable or comfortable if you just go up to someone and start kind of saying sort of things that might make someone uncomfortable? What's the outcome of that going to be? We kind of took it from them first meeting right up to, I think we got to about their first date and maybe the first time that they decided to become sort of intimate with each other. And one of our students on the left there, he kind of took the pen and kind of went off on one a little bit with that, but it was fine because Kate said we've made kind of make that safe space, and it's okay to explore this language and to have these discussions. And it was good that he felt kind of in a place where he was able to express himself in that way. So that was some really, really good fun work. We had a lot of fun doing that kind of stuff. And I feel like it's a really, really good way to explore a relationship, because it's a bit more removed. You've got these characters that you can kind of pin these things on. So that was a really fun way to do it.
I think to add to that, Gemma, I think you would agree that comic strips are also a really nice way, or one way, of exploring language. So that, you know, if you do any RSE training, sort of your own CPD, you know, one of the things that we've learned through all the things we've done is that it's really important to label and call things what they are. So whilst in a comic strip, you know, if the student is leading on that and writing and drawing things, they might use different words for body parts, but actually it's really important that we say penis or vagina. So thinking about how we offer them those spaces to explore their identities and whatever is in their head from things they've seen or heard, but that we are still giving them the correct language, the correct terms, because from a safeguarding point of view, when you think about people who have interactions with the criminal justice system, having that language is going to be necessary to navigate those experiences if they happened. So I think comic strips have been really good for us to be able to try and illustrate that point a bit. Gemma, I think, do you agree?
Yeah, definitely. And while kind of some of the language that they have chosen to use during these comic strips have been kind of like slang based, or sort of to make everybody, you know, make us in the room laugh, we've kind of then brought that discussion around, like, okay, so what is the kind of, what other words might we have for that particular body part or that particular thing? And now we'll kind of discuss it and we'll give them that language. And then we had one student who started then using that language in one session, and before, at the start of the sessions that we were doing, he didn't have those words at all, and then he started using them more and more in the session, so it was really powerful. So this is a sorting activity that I did with one of our students. So we've got a lot of different students with very different speech, language, and communication needs. So while some of our students can work with the comic strip and do these mind map activities, and we can kind of have these more kind of discussion-based activities, some of our students need to be sort of differentiated and presented differently. And, you know, it might be that those same themes need revisiting and sort of teaching quite slowly over a long period of time. So Kate sort of touched on it earlier about the concept of safe. Particular student needed a lot of input for that concept, and this piece of work was kind of linking with that, really, sort of being able to recognize healthy, unhealthy, and abusive behaviors and sorting it into the different headings, sort of sorting the behaviors that you might expect to see within those types of relationships. So this one was kind of starting to think about consent. So a lot of RSE concepts are really abstract, and, you know, like Kate said earlier, they're not easy to learn. So our students need to use different types of activities to consolidate their learning, to be able to practice it in a real life context, because that's really difficult as well. Saying something in the isolated context of the classroom or therapy room and then going out and living that is really difficult. And I'm sure you'll all have experienced, we saw a lot of rote learned language. So some of our students' responses to what is safe was staff keep me safe, and that was their response for most of the year. Something you can imagine a person with their support circle having said to them in the past, staff will keep you safe, staff will keep you safe. And it was really hard for them to share more examples or to understand that safe has multiple meanings. So things like daily living, turning off a plug socket, or within the context of RSE, using contraception during sex. So we've done a lot of activities exploring consent, which is what these photos are of. So we found that if a student was able to tell us about the word consent, which a lot of them aren't, but if they were, they could only really give us that very basic saying yes or no, or they kind of would talk about the making the tea video. So we really had to kind of explore the nuances of consent, and breaking down the definition, which is the photo on the bottom right there, we found was quite a good place to start. So we kind of took the official definition and we really, really broke it down, and we started talking about sort of capacity and freedom. And again, that kind of opens up a whole thing. That's two more abstract concepts within another abstract concept. So we had to sort of learn those things, learn about capacity, learn about freedom. And we did that with sort of true or false sorting. We did statement sorting and matching. We've done sort of scenario comic strips to explore when someone is giving consent and when they are not, despite what they might be saying. So we've thought about, what does consent look like? What does it not look like? So what body language are we looking out for? What does giving consent feel like for you in your body? How do you know that you feel safe? How do you know that you really do consent to it? So it's constantly linking back to that interoception piece.
Thanks, Gemma. So by the end of last academic year, so sort of last July time, we completed our post-intervention assessments, and you can see from the examples on the screen there that for both students C and J that they had made progress with their understanding of those different words. So we were really thrilled with this improvement and the growth in our students' understanding, the feedback that they gave us, the fact that they wanted to carry on with this session this year. So that was all really, really fantastic. But I think we do, like Gemma just mentioned a bit ago, we do feel like it's only responsible to flag that, whilst we did this great piece of work and it's shaped a lot of our speech and language therapy offer, that actually this is only one piece of the puzzle, if you like, for someone. So, that work initially began because of the mental capacity assessments, people lacking capacity. We've given them some education, we've differentiated that, we've really tried to think carefully about what that looks like. And so that's really brilliant, but rarely is the question just about capacity to have sex. It's often about other vulnerabilities. So it's about person wanting what other people have. It's about navigating relationships in a virtual world. It's about wanting to be liked. It's not just about capacity to have sex. And so we have to consider those other factors. And also, like Gemma said, about it's one thing talking about things and learning about things in an environment where stimuli is quite low and stress is managed, compared to being out in the big wide world and sensory stimuli and stresses being a lot higher, and that compromising our ability to cope with different situations and to follow through with what we might have talked about in a safe therapy space. We got some student and teacher feedback. So one of our students said, I love these sessions. I feel like I go away every week a bit wiser, which I think made Gemma and our day that day. It just set us up for the afternoon. And we've had a few teachers sit in on the sessions who, because RSE is part of the curriculum now, they wanted to see about how we were navigating those sessions, how we were differentiating it. And one of the teachers' feedback was that you inspire me every time and the students love it. Thanks for letting me sit in. And I think a standout moment for us is that we won Educator of the Year for Innovation last year with the Sex Education Forum for our use of speech and language therapy in RSE. So we were really, really pleased about that. That was fantastic. And then just to sort of finish off, because I'm mindful of time, Gemma's just got a few slides on resources.
Yeah, just really quickly, just wanted to have just share some resources that we found really useful in kind of like building our own RSE program. So the Supported Loving website is really good, got loads of good resources available. We've got the What is Sex book by Kate Reynolds, which I think Kate has with her. That's a really, really good book as well. We've used that a lot. The Sex Education Forum has a lot of resources available. Lots of training webinars, and they have a membership available where you get more resources if you're a member, I think. And we've also got there's a sex and relationships page on MenCap. If you just Google MenCap relationships, that will come up, and that's got a lot of toolkits and resources on it. The Tough Cookies resource is a book. So the Tough Cookies book is something that we've got at the college, and we love it. It's got really, really good visuals, really good illustrations. And it's we've used it to kind of shape our own program, and we found it really useful. And mentioned to the sex factor training, which was some training that I was lucky enough to go on, I think last year. It's all a bit of a blur, but this was talking about delivering sex education to people with sort of profound multiple learner disabilities. So that really differentiated, really differentiated, quite stepped down sex education. And that was really, really good, really interesting. So I just like to sort of mention them.
So that's the end of our presentation. If anyone has any questions and we've got time to answer them, then we'll do our best. But if not, feel free to contact us. Absolutely
fantastic. Thank you so much. Some really positive comments coming in. I'd say there's quite a few questions. I think given there's only a wee bit of time before the next one, but there is one. I think you've by sharing those resources, you've been really helpful to some of those questions. I think one, I personally from us at PBS UK, just want to applaud you guys massively. It's still fairly taboo area for some reason, whatever it is. Again, maybe it's oversharing, but as an adolescent, I don't remember thinking about much else, if I'm being honest. So yeah, what a strange thing to miss out of thinking about. And the stuff that you're doing is just fantastic, and you explain it in such an accessible way. It's an absolute pleasure to watch you guys. Thank you. I think, as I say, I think the resources will answer some of the questions that are asked here, but one particular one, and I know some people might have to go and that kind of stuff, that's fine. But if you guys are happy to answer just one or two of these. Aisha has asked, saying, if there was an individual who was 17 and hadn't received any RSE, as the parents were opposed to this and stated they didn't want the individual to receive this, but the individual shown clear frustration and confusion related to this, what would you suggest to help?
That's tricky, isn't it? Off the top of my head, first of all, I recognise that they're 17, which means they're over the age that the Mental Capacity Act now applies. So if they have capacity to want to be learning about these things and to have those conversations, then that's sort of giving you an answer in terms of the capacity point of view. I think there are quite a few resources. I'm pretty sure the Sex Education Forum have some resources about navigating conversations. And because it has become part of that statutory part of the curriculum and everything now, there are resources available for sharing with parents and carers about, we're going to be starting these sessions if you want to have conversations about it. So I'll definitely have a look at those, because I've seen templates, of letters and information available before that you could maybe tweak. And maybe just, I would try to invite curiously a conversation about why, like with the parent, and just try to make that a safer space, because for parents, it could be quite uncomfortable for them to think about their children as,
I think sometimes as well it relates to religion and culture.
Yeah.
And when that's the case for some religions and cultures, there's suggestions that it actually is like prohibited that you do that kind of thing. But I'm aware that in some circumstances when that has been the case, they've been able to have a conversation with the church leader and explain the circumstances and gain consent from their church leader under the circumstances, which has made the family feel much better about the situation.
I think, again, like you said, absolutely right to bring in the Mental Capacity Act, I think, in those conversations, but you're absolutely right in terms of exploring those stuff with the families. If people are familiar with anything from Adele Grandin, I think she has a presentation on YouTube that's about kind of letting go as a parent, and she quite rightly says that a lot of parents, nobody supports them with that transition for their child, going from a child to an adult, and what that means and how to support them. So I think you're absolutely right in the tone of your answer, that this is much about understanding the parent's perspective, which can be really frustrating for your individual practitioner involved. I could sense it, but sometimes moving a bit more slowly might actually help you move through this a little bit more quickly. There's a riddle at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Yeah.
No, that's a good point.
We will keep a copy of the chat here just so we can pick out if there's any questions we've missed. We'll pull them out, get them over to you guys, Kate and Gemma, and give you a bit of time to have a think about them. But loads of thank yous coming in, loads of how helpful this has been. And I imagine if we're all in a room together, you'd hear kind of rapturous applause right now. So yeah, on behalf of the Quiet Group,
thank you very much.
Thank you so much, guys. Oh, hang on. Can you say the Adele Grandin reference, please? Yeah, it's Adele. Here, I'll put it in. Let me do it. Adele Grandin. Yeah. And it's a YouTube thing. We'll see if we can dig that out and include it in the kind of notes that we'll do. Yeah, there's a recording of this talk and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, don't worry, you'll get to see it if you've missed out. Okay, Gemma, absolutely fantastic job as always. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Pleasure. Nice to
Take
see
care.
you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.